Welcome to the Nation of History channel. Be sure to subscribe and like so you don't miss out on more videos like this one. A West Berlin police officer stands guard while East German soldiers raise the first structures of the Berlin Wall in 1961. The scene shows the striking contrast between the watchful stillness on the western side and the intense activity of the military on the eastern side. Inside the Launch Control Center, technicians and engineers watch at their consoles as the Saturn V rocket lifts off the launch pad on July 16, 1969, carrying the Apollo 11 astronauts aboard. The Eiffel Tower is shown under construction on May 15, 1888, when its metal framework already rose over Paris, reaching about two-thirds of its final height. Designed by Gustave Eiffel for the 1889 Exposition Universelle, the project used more than 18,000 iron pieces assembled with thousands of rivets by specialized crews. The first-class gym aboard the Titanic is shown in 1912, equipped with modern devices for the time, such as exercise bicycles, mechanical rowing machines, and even an electric horse for balance exercises. A Titanic survivor is photographed in 1912, giving an autograph, a few weeks after the shipwreck that marked maritime history. Many who escaped were met with immense public curiosity, becoming involuntary figures of note in newspapers, talks, and events. Buzz Aldrin arrives at NASA's Kennedy Space Center on July 9, 1969, for final training preparations before the Apollo 11 mission, which would launch only a week later toward the moon. Fidel Castro is photographed speaking with Yuri Gagarin in Havana, Cuba in 1961, a few months after the Soviet cosmonaut became the first man to travel into space. The image shows Martin Luther King Jr. in 1960 removing a burned cross from his yard, with his young son beside him. The act of placing burning crosses was a form of intimidation used against black families and civil rights activists in the United States. Royal Navy sailors celebrate with their girlfriends in the fountains of Trafalgar Square in London on Victory in Europe Day, May 8, 1945. The scene shows the spontaneous outpouring of joy that filled the streets after the official announcement of the war's end in Europe. British fighters and German aircraft engage in intense air battles during the Battle of Britain in 1940, when the United Kingdom faced large-scale air attacks. The skies over London and other cities were the stage for decisive clashes, where Royal Air Force pilots stood out for their resistance against enemy bombers and fighters. On May 18, 1980, Richard Lasher captured the eruption of Mount St. Helens in Washington state in one of the most striking images of the disaster. At the moment of the photo, a huge ash cloud already towered in the sky, the result of the most violent volcanic eruption in modern United States history. Photographed in 1974, the newly excavated terracotta warriors in China still show their 2,000-year-old paint, shortly before it deteriorated rapidly upon exposure to air. The Concorde performs a flyover of Sydney Harbor in 1972 in one of the demonstration flights that introduced the world to the most famous supersonic airliner in history. With its futuristic design and the ability to fly at more than twice the speed of sound, the aircraft symbolized the peak of Franco-British aeronautical engineering. Firearm safety classes were taught at a rural school in Indiana in 1956, reflecting educational practices common in agricultural communities in the United States at that time. An experimental Ford vehicle with a bubble-shaped glass roof was unveiled in 1947, reflecting the post-war auto industry's spirit of innovation. The futuristic design aimed to increase visibility for the driver and passengers and to convey a sense of modernity inspired by aviation. The first Boeing 747 was unveiled at a ceremony at the Everett, Washington assembly plant in 1968, marking the start of a new era in commercial aviation. Known as the jumbo jet, the model impressed with its unprecedented size and its capacity to carry more than 400 passengers, which was revolutionary for the time. An electric car is recharged in a garage in 1911, showing that battery-powered vehicles were already being explored in the early 20th century. These cars were especially popular among urban families because they were quiet, did not require hand cranks to start, and could be charged at home, as the scene shows. The French battleship Redoutable appears in dry dock around 1875, the world's first warship built entirely of steel. The vessel marked a technological milestone for the French Navy and global naval engineering, since steel offered greater structural strength and lower weight compared with iron. Engineers posed before the gigantic lock gates of the Panama Canal in 1913, when the project was nearing completion after almost a decade of work under United States administration. Walt Disney is photographed in 1945 during a recording session, voicing Mickey Mouse alongside Clarence Nash, who performed Donald Duck. The scene brings together two pillars of animation who gave life to characters that were already global icons. The photo shows Disneyland's employee cafeteria in 1961, a space reserved for workers at California's most famous park. In the scene, performers still dressed as iconic characters such as Snow White, Indians, cowboys, and Disney figures appear side by side in an ordinary dining setting. Soccer star Pelé and United States President Gerald Ford are photographed kicking a ball on the White House lawn in 1975. The unusual scene shows the Brazilian icon, already world famous, interacting informally with the American leader. Harrison Ford, Carrie Fisher, and Mark Hamill appear together in a 1980 promotional photo for The Empire Strikes Back, the second chapter of the Star Wars saga. The three actors, already recognized worldwide for the roles of Han Solo, Princess Leia, and Luke Skywalker, helped cement the franchise as a cultural phenomenon. Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife Sophie are photographed in 1914, minutes before the attack that would change world history. The image, colorized here, shows the couple inside the car in Sarajevo, surrounded by officers and civilians, unaware of the tragic fate that would soon follow. Anthony Daniels is photographed backstage on Star Wars in 1976, taking a break to smoke a cigarette while still in his C-3PO costume. Sean Connery is photographed in 1953 when he took part in the Mr. Universe contest before beginning his acting career. Then, 22 years old, Connery worked as a model and an amateur bodybuilder, which led him to compete in the bodybuilding event held in London. A young Sean Connery is pictured serving in the Royal Navy in 1946, long before achieving worldwide fame as an actor. Enlisted at 16, Connery served as a sailor for 3 years, during which he worked in maintenance and naval logistics roles. Bob Dylan appears with his wife Sarah and daughter Anna in 1968, in a rare family image of the musician away from the stage. During that period, Dylan kept a lower profile after his 1966 motorcycle accident, living more privately in Woodstock, New York, while focusing on family life and writing at a quieter pace. John Travolta poses with his pilot hat in 1985, showing his passion for aviation, which he pursued alongside his acting career. The star of Grease and Saturday Night Fever had already obtained his first pilot's license in 1978, only 7 years before this photo. Gary Anderson, then 23 years old, was photographed in 1970, the year he won a contest with the creation of the famous recycling logo. The symbol, made of 3 arrows forming a continuous triangle, represented the cycle of renewal and reuse of materials, and it quickly became an environmental icon recognized around the world. The luxuries of flying in the past are depicted on the upper deck of a Qantas Airways Boeing 747 in 1971, the year the Australian carrier began operating the new jumbo jet. Window cleaners work on the facades of the World Trade Center towers in 1979 in a scene that highlights both the building's scale and the risk of the job. Suspended on platforms hundreds of feet in the air, they maintained the glass that covered the newly opened skyscrapers. Manchester City player Mike Summerbee is photographed in 1967, demonstrating the built-in record player in his new Volvo P1800, an unusual automotive design detail of the era. The elegant Swedish coupe was already known for its refined style and became even more famous for appearing in the series The Saint, starring Roger Moore. Colonel Harlan Sanders, founder of Kentucky Fried Chicken, is photographed cooking his fried chicken in 1969 in Nashville, Tennessee. Already recognized worldwide as the face of the brand, Sanders kept the habit of attending events and cooking in person, reinforcing the authenticity of his recipe. 2 Amphicar amphibious cars crossed the English Channel in 1965 in an impressive demonstration of the versatility of this unusual vehicle. Made in West Germany, the Amphicar could travel on roads and on open water, using propellers at the rear for navigation. Jean Bugatti is photographed in 1932 beside his Bugatti Type 41 Royale, one of only 7 produced. The luxurious automobile, known for its imposing size and a 12.7-liter engine, about 775 cubic inches, was designed for kings and heads of state, although few were sold because of the Great Depression. The British airship R-33 is seen in its hangar during preparations for the first flight in Barlow, Yorkshire, in 1919. Built from captured designs of German airships at the end of World War I, the R-33 measured over 190 meters long, more than 620 feet, and was designed for patrol and reconnaissance missions. The hydrofoil vessel Meteor is shown in the Soviet Union in 1972, one of the most iconic fast-water transport models developed during the Soviet era. Designed by Rostislav Alexeyev, the Meteor used submerged foils that lifted the hull above the surface at high speeds, reducing drag and allowing faster, more stable travel. John F. Kennedy appears in 1939 at 22 years old, before his permanent entry into American politics. A son of an influential Boston family, he had finished his studies at Harvard and was preparing for travels to Europe, where he closely observed the tensions that preceded World War II. Norma Jean, who would later be known as Marilyn Monroe, is photographed in the snow in 1945, when she still worked as a model early in her career. At 19, she began to appear in simple photo shoots marked by spontaneity and youthful freshness, before her transformation into a Hollywood icon. Marilyn Monroe is photographed in New York in 1957, waiting in line to buy a hot dog, in a scene that reveals her simple, everyday side amid a star's life. San Francisco in the 1950s is depicted in a scene that combines the city's historical tradition with post-war dynamism. Busy streets, streetcars running along steep hills, and the bay in the background formed the signature landscape that drew residents and visitors. The crew of a United States Navy cruiser receives their pay on board in 1942 during World War II. The scene shows sailors lined up before the accounting officer who handed out wages in cash, a common practice before the adoption of bank deposits. Idi Amin, then the ruler of Uganda, received Louis Farrakhan in 1975, a representative of the Nation of Islam who would later become the organization's leader, along with other African-American delegates. A projectile struck the Cathedral of Notre-Dame de Reims on September 19, 1914, during World War I, causing fires that destroyed much of the roof and medieval stained glass. A police photo of Josip Broz Tito, taken on April 5, 1928, shows the future leader of Yugoslavia shortly after his arrest in Zagreb. At the time, he and other demonstrators had tried to free a baker who had been detained by local police. The Kodak K24 camera is shown in 1943, when it was widely used by the United States Army Air Forces for aerial photography during World War II. The equipment was developed from civilian models adapted for military use and was mounted in reconnaissance aircraft, allowing detailed images of the terrain below. A woman is photographed operating Britain's first automatic potato machine in 1962, installed in Chelsea, London. The equipment was designed to offer fresh potatoes ready to cook, illustrating the wave of vending innovations spreading across the United Kingdom during that period. Two people talk beside a refrigerated fruit vending machine, among other vending models, in 1959. This type of equipment represented the modernization of consumer life in the second half of the 20th century, when convenience machines began to offer a wide range of products. The Greyhound bus terminal in Los Angeles offered around 1969 a curious service called telechairs. These individual seats came equipped with small televisions, allowing passengers to watch programs while waiting for buses to depart. A McDonald's restaurant in the 1950s shows the beginning of the chain's transformation into an American cultural icon. The locations had simple, colorful facades, highlighting the famous golden arches that would soon become a worldwide symbol. The first Coca-Cola delivery in Knoxville, Tennessee, was recorded in 1919, marking the brand's expansion into new regions of the American South. The shipment arrived in wooden crates, carried by wagons and simple trucks, reflecting the distribution methods of the time. A flight attendant prepares sophisticated meals, including chef's salad, filet mignon, and ice cream, in the galley of a Pan Am Clipper during a flight from San Francisco to New Zealand in 1948. A car parking elevator is shown in operation in Chicago in 1936, reflecting urban innovations as traffic grew in major cities. The system allowed cars to be stacked on different levels inside vertical garages, optimizing the use of space in central areas. A station in Kern County, California, in 1938 offers free air for car tires, something that would become common in the United States during the expansion of car culture. EMI's quality control room is shown around 1965, during a period of intense music production in the United Kingdom. The environment brought together specialists who reviewed recordings, tested vinyl pressings, and ensured that sound reached consumers with the best possible fidelity. The traditional Barton Fair in Vermont is recorded in 1965, showing the festive atmosphere that brought local residents together around attractions typical of rural America. The event featured livestock exhibitions, homemade food stands, agricultural competitions, and fairground rides. A typical American family is pictured in Detroit, Michigan in the 1950s, in a moment that symbolizes the ideal of post-war prosperity. The city, then the capital of the United States auto industry, was a major center of jobs and innovation, attracting thousands of workers. Ingrid Bergman is photographed in 1952 with her newborn twin daughters, Isabella and Isotta Rossellini, from her relationship with director Roberto Rossellini. The Swedish actress, already acclaimed in Hollywood for films such as Casablanca and Gaslight, was then facing major public controversy because of the romance with Rossellini. Audrey Hepburn is photographed in 1959 enjoying time with her pet deer named Pippin, affectionately nicknamed Ip. The animal was given to her by an animal trainer during the filming of Green Mansions, so it would get used to her presence off the set. Frank Sinatra appears surrounded by fans in 1943 at the height of his rise as one of the most popular singers in the United States. Known as The Voice, Sinatra drew large crowds, especially young admirers who packed shows and events to see him up close. Betty White is photographed at her Los Angeles home in 1952, relaxing beside her dog in a scene that shows the actress's warm and personal side early in her career. A girl enjoys an ice cream while playfully teasing a royal guard in Sweden during the 1970s, in a scene that contrasts a child's lightness with the rigidity of military ceremony. A curious piece of equipment shaped like a toy rocking horse was used in the United States in 1957 to help keep children still during chest X-rays. Known as a hobby horse X-ray device, the apparatus sought to make the procedure less frightening. Whirling Horse, a man of the Sioux Nation, is pictured around 1900, preserving the presence and cultural identity of indigenous peoples of North America in the early 20th century. An Australian school canteen is pictured in 1962, showing the simple social routine of students at the time. The space served basic snacks, such as sandwiches, cakes, fruit, and drinks, often prepared by volunteers from the school community. Farrah Fawcett and Jaclyn Smith appear together in an image from 1976 during filming of the series Charlie's Angels. The show premiered that year and quickly became a cultural phenomenon, featuring 3 private detectives who worked for the mysterious agency of Charlie Townsend. Residents of Hanoi are shown seeking shelter during an air raid alert in 1967 in a photograph taken by American journalist and photographer Lee Lockwood. The scene shows families gathered in improvised protective spaces, reflecting the constant tension civilians faced during bombing in the Vietnam conflict. A traffic scene is recorded during the major flood in Mexico City, when the water level rose to about half a meter at its peak, roughly 1.6 feet, around 20 inches. Main streets were completely flooded, and cars, buses, and pedestrians struggled to move. The midsummer celebration takes place at Tingsvallen, Skansen, Stockholm in 1970, bringing together families and visitors for one of Sweden's most traditional cultural events. A truck shaped like a coffee pot is shown in 1950, used to promote Gevalia coffee in Sweden. The vehicle drew attention in the streets for its creative design and worked as a roving marketing tool, attracting curiosity and reinforcing the brand's identity. An outdoor ice hockey game in Sweden in 1959 is stopped before the end, in a scene that shows both the sport's popularity in the country and the challenges of matches held in natural conditions. A young woman is pictured in 1944 writing a thank you note to her boyfriend who served in the United States Navy after receiving as a gift the skull of a Japanese soldier. Flying with a baby in the 1950s and 1960s was a very different experience from today, reflecting both the lifestyle of the era and aviation rules that were still developing. In 1944, a fake neighborhood was built on a rooftop to camouflage an aircraft factory during World War II. The complex, located in the United States, produced aircraft essential to the war effort and needed protection from possible air attacks. Fruit pickers take a break in an orchard during the 1950s, in a scene that portrays everyday agricultural work after the war. Sitting among heavily laden trees, they use the pause to rest and recover from long hours of physical effort in the sun. Red Army soldiers rest on a beach alongside local women on Denmark's island of Bornholm, occupied by the Soviet Union beginning on May 9, 1945. Soviet control followed the end of the war in Europe after the island was bombed to force the withdrawal of German troops. With their children in Vilnius, in the then Lithuanian Soviet Socialist Republic in 1969, in a scene that shows family life amid the urban setting of the Soviet period. A set of triplets is photographed enjoying ice cream in 1965 in a light and cheerful scene of family life. Sitting side by side, each one enjoys a frozen treat, reflecting both the simplicity of childhood pleasures and the optimistic atmosphere of the 1960s. Richard Nixon takes part in a rally in Paoli, Pennsylvania, in July 1968, during his presidential campaign that would take him to the White House that same year. The scene shows the Republican candidate before a crowd during the election season, as the United States faced intense social and political turmoil. British Prime Minister Winston Churchill is photographed in a rare leisure moment, enjoying a swim. Known for his firm leadership during World War II, Churchill also had the habit of swimming as a form of relaxation and exercise. A burial at sea is conducted aboard the aircraft carrier USS Intrepid around the 1940s in a solemn ceremony dedicated to crew members who lost their lives in service. Sailors lined up on deck pay final respects as the flag-draped bodies are prepared for commitment to the ocean, in keeping with naval tradition. A man walks with a pig along the sidewalk of a rural village in the People's Republic of Poland between 1980 and 1989. The scene reflects the country's simple agricultural daily life during the socialist era, when many families still raised animals on a small scale for their own use. Shaquille O'Neal, at 17 years old, appears with his high school basketball team in San Antonio, Texas, in 1989. Even as a teenager, he already drew attention for his impressive height and natural talent for the sport, standing out as a dominant center. Playing for Robert G. A women's dormitory is recorded late at night in the 1970s, revealing the everyday environment of young students on a university campus. Shared rooms, rows of beds, and personal items scattered around show the simplicity of the space, shaped by intense daily life among roommates. If you enjoyed this video and want to support the channel, please use the Super Thanks tool below. Your contribution helps us keep bringing you amazing historical content. Thank you so much for your support, and see you in the next video.